Okay, in this video, we're going to take a look at some of the other tabs in Sampler, and these are the controls that really set it apart from a lot of other sampling plugins that are out there. The first tab we're going to go to is the Filter Global tab, and these are very familiar controls, just with some extra parameters that you will learn about in time. First, you can see we have a filter and a filter envelope. You can see them both side by side. The filter envelope is a little more advanced than the one in Simpler in that you can control the slope of each stage of the envelope. And you can see when I click on that, those numbers at the bottom turn red. That indicates that we are changing the slope and not the actual main parameters of the envelope. There's also an amplitude envelope here. And again, by now you know what that does. It adjusts the sound so that you could have a slower attack time, a quieter sustain, a longer release, what have you. There are also pan controls here. There are some other controls that we're not going to cover in this video because they're a little too advanced, a little outside our course. But if you want to know what these do, I highly recommend you look them up in the Ableton Live manual. You can download it for free online. Just like in Simpler and in Wavetable, the envelopes have the ability to loop and have a variety of different looping modes. So this is the tab that we're probably most familiar with because we've seen filters, filter envelopes, and amplitude envelopes in just about everything. The other parameters that are down here, such as pan, randomization, time, velocity, timing, all that stuff, you will learn about later. Let's go to the Modulation tab. This is also very familiar to you. You can turn this on, each section with its own yellow button. And as you can see, we have an auxiliary envelope, just a freestanding envelope that you can assign up to 2 destinations. And there are a large variety of destinations to choose from. And you could adjust the strength of that envelope control over whatever parameter you select. We also have 3 LFOs. Now, LFO1 has 4 dedicated controls, one for volume, one for panning, one for the filter, and one for pitch, where LFO 2 and 3 only have 2 destinations, but they're assignable to just about anything. So again, these have all the same controls as every other LFO, and there are 1,000,001 creative possibilities in the Modulation tab. In the MIDI tab, we have a MIDI modulation matrix, sort of like the one in Wavetable, where you can send modulation to 2 different destinations for each of these parameters. So for instance, if you wanted the MIDI keyboard pitch to trigger some kind of change in your volume, in your oscillator volume, or in your main volume, you could do that. If you have a MIDI controller with a mod wheel or a foot control, again, you can assign all those parameters here. Now, the last tab we're going to talk about in this video is the Pitch Oscillator tab. And here you have 2 controls. The pitch envelope has the standard controls of attack, decay, and release. It also has these controls: initial, peak, sustain, and end. And what those do, they change the height of each stage. And that's something that you can't do with every envelope. Now, up here on top, we have this oscillator, and what this does is this adds even more modulation to your signal. There's FM and AM modulation. This is frequency modulation, and this is amplitude modulation. If that sounds familiar to you, yes, that is also how the radio works. For each one of these, we have envelope controls similar to the bottom: attack, decay, and release. We also have the initial, peak, and sustain, which are decibel levels. Looping, and then you can adjust what kind of oscillator it is, what kind of wave it is. Is it a sine wave, a saw wave, a square wave? What kind of wave do you want it to be? The volume of that wave. And again, this is kind of a weird concept, but you are not going to hear this oscillator. With this oscillator, you will hear the effects of it. The oscillator is like the wind. You can't see the wind, but you can see the trees blowing. That's the way this oscillator is. And if I play this phantasm sample, we can hear how the oscillator affects it. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to change this to looping mode, and I might bring that loop down there. I might crossfade that quite a bit. Sounds pretty nasty, but there are a lot of creative possibilities with having an oscillator inside a sampler. Now there's one tab left, and that's the zone tab. That is the tab you use for multi-sampling, and that's a whole other video unto itself.